In the personal story segment tonight, Donald Trump's pick for Secretary of Defense. Last night at his rally in Cincinnati, the president-elect put his showmanship on display by making a surprise early announcement.
We are going to appoint Mad Dog Mattis as our Secretary of Defense. But we're not announcing it till Monday, so don't tell anybody.
General James Mattis served in the Marine Corps for more than 4 decades and has a reputation as a general's general. But is he the right choice to run the Pentagon? Joining us now from Little Rock, Arkansas, General Wesley Clark, former Supreme Allied Commander of NATO. And from Miami, Ambassador Nancy Soderberg, former Deputy National Security Advisor for President Clinton. So, Ambassador Soderberg, is James Mattis the right person to be Secretary of Defense?
Well, the president-elect has the right to choose anyone he wants, and there's no better general's general than Mattis, who has served our country with enormous distinction. But I think the question is, you have to look at this as a whole team. He's got basically filling like a football team full of linebackers, but you've got a general in the National Security Council and at the Pentagon, and none of them have the deep policy experience that Donald Trump is going to need. So we have to see how the whole team balances out, but there's lots of questions about whether he's getting the right team around him, notwithstanding the great service that Mattis has done to this country.
General Clark, I want to pick up on that, because there's no question that if you were the commander-in-chief and you needed somebody to seize that beachhead, that James Mattis is the guy you would choose. But is he the kind of strategic thinker to give the president the best advice when it comes to world affairs, and perhaps just as importantly, to think about the kind of military that we need to face the threats of the 21st century?
Well, I think Jim Mattis is an outstanding choice. I'll tell you why. First, I do think he is a strategic thinker. He does see the big picture. He's well aware of Russia and the problems of Russia, and President-elect Trump needs someone like that who can really understand the big picture. In his recent testimony, he called for a national strategy, and so it's more than the Middle East. But he is experienced in dealing with policies at the combatant command level and executing those policies, and you need somebody who can work policies all the way down to the execution level. I do agree with what Nancy Soderberg says about needing policy expertise, but that policy expertise comes in staff members at the National Security Council staff and also at the Pentagon. The challenge for General Mattis is to take his big picture view and make sure that all the periods and commas and colons in the policy papers support that big view.
Ambassador, let me bring you in. Your response to that, particularly in this question of reforming the Pentagon, creating the kind of military we need for the 21st century. Does Mattis have the credentials to do that? And specifically on this issue of the waiver, because Congress is going to have to pass a waiver since he hasn't been out of the military for 7 years. Do you envision any problem in Congress doing that and Mattis getting through?
3 points. On the first one, I think Mattis certainly knows the Pentagon inside and out. You want somebody who knows how to make those decisions. He's got that down. On the question of the waiver, I think he'll get this waiver. Donald Trump controls both houses of Congress. He's got the clear majority in the Senate. He may need to get a supermajority to get the waiver through. But on balance, people are going to have a problem with his 4 years versus 7 years out of the military. But they're going to give the president the team he wants. That's his right, and that's what you get when you win the election. I think the bigger question is, what kind of team is Donald Trump building? It's very odd to pick your UN ambassador before you've picked your Secretary of State. We have 2 generals in the mix here, and we still don't know who Secretary of State is going to be. General Petraeus is in the short list by all accounts. And so you could have 3 generals in the key 3 posts here. My concern, and I think all Americans want Donald Trump to succeed as a policymaker, is we've got huge issues coming on here, and these are some of the tough problems. You've got cyber, you've got ISIS, you've got Libya, you've got Syria, you've got trade issues, the broad issues. And he needs people at the very top who've really been in that seat making those policy decisions. So I hope he brings on someone as the deputies to these men, and also as Secretary of State, who's got that deep, someone like a Stephen Hadley who served with George Bush. And it's odd, and this process is nothing but odd, but you usually would look at your team on balance before you announce pieces of it. So we'll see how it works out when it's all announced.
Are you troubled at all by that, General Clark, the idea that this is being done piecemeal and that the Secretary of State seems to be the last piece of the puzzle? And between Mike Flynn, retired general, who's going to be National Security Advisor, and General Mattis, you got two guys who are really tough about Iran. Are we sending a message to Tehran in all of this?
I hope we are sending a message to Tehran. And, of course, Mike Flynn is a spark plug. I mean, he's got a lot of energy. He wants to get things done. He's in a very difficult position in that National Security Council position, as Nancy Soderberg was saying, because that really is all about policy, treaties, laws. You got to read the fine print, and you got to somehow do it in a way that serves the president. I think we've got to get good, strong, second supporting players in those positions. As far as the announcement is concerned, Chris, you know, Donald Trump's shown he really knows how to handle the media and public opinion, and his announcement for Jim Mattis yesterday in Cincinnati was masterful the way he did it. Now Mattis has a lot of he's got a lot of power inside the Republican Party. He's well known. He was a strong pick, and so there's a message in the way this is being released. I suspect Trump is not releasing the names in the order that he knows them, but he's releasing them sort of from the bottom up as he's building the suspense and building the support, and this is showmanship.
Well, if it's showmanship, it's pretty good showmanship because he's gotten the nation's attention. General Clark, Ambassador Soderberg, thank you both so much tonight.
My pleasure.
Joining us now with reaction, Delaware Democratic Senator Chris Coons. Let's start with those comments from Congressman Gutierrez. First of all, do you think that's appropriate? Do you think many Democrats will boycott Trump's inauguration, and will you?
Well, Chris, I'm planning to go to the inauguration. I think regardless of how you feel about the election or who won, we owe it to our nation and to the world to show that we're going to participate in the orderly, peaceful, regular transition of power that has happened every 4 years throughout the entire history of our republic. I think this is an important moment for us to show our country and the world that democracy works, that we embrace the outcome of the election and the chance to work together across the aisle. I choose to follow what I think has been the example of both President-elect Trump in his victory speech on the night of the election, and then President Obama and Secretary Clinton in saying we all look for President-elect Trump to be successful.
Well, I applaud you for your consistency, but not all of your fellow Democrats are being so consistent. And, you know, when I remember I was the moderator of the third debate, and I asked Mr. Trump whether he would recognize the results of the election. He said, I'm going to keep you in suspense. Hillary Clinton said that was horrifying. People, Democrats, liberals, said they were horrified about citing the principle of the peaceful transfer of power. Now, though, that it's Trump who's the president, not all of them are sticking to that principle.
Well, I think what concerned folks in that debate with that I'll keep you in suspense was the possibility that Trump, if he were unsuccessful in the election, would contest it, not through legal, orderly means, but would refuse to accept it.
But now you've got the Green Party calling for recounts in 3 states, the Clinton campaign saying they're going to participate. Isn't this hypocrisy?
Well, I think what's different there, what's distinguishable, is that Jill Stein, who's the presidential candidate of the Green Party, let's be clear, is following a legal process to file contests against those 3 states' elections and asking for a recount. That's quite different from saying you refuse to accept the outcome. Speaking for myself, I accept the outcome of the election. I think it's clear that Secretary Clinton won the popular vote and that Donald Trump won the Electoral College, and he's going to be our next president. And I think we need to move forward past this election.
What do you think of moving forward? What do you think of the Trump agenda as he's laid it out so far, especially at that Carrier event yesterday in Indiana, on this issue of really being tough on companies leaving the United States?
Well, there's been some criticism of that. I think the editorial board of the Wall Street Journal said from a sort of a conservative economic policy perspective that they don't want the president jawboning specific companies. But I'll tell you, if I had family that were working at that Carrier plant, I'd be pleased that their jobs were, for now, saved. What I'd like to see is us coming up with a concrete bipartisan agenda for strengthening manufacturing in the United States. And if we focus on improving infrastructure and improving the skills of our workforce and making our country a more attractive place for investment, I think there's a chance we can grow manufacturing employment.
One more issue. What do you think of the choice of retired General James Mattis for Secretary of Defense? Will you vote to give him the waiver because he has not been out of the military for 7 years? Will you vote to confirm?
Well, I was very encouraged by his nomination. I've talked to a number of friends who are Marine Corps veterans who know him from service and who've said very positive things about him as someone who reads a great deal, who served more than 4 decades in the Marine Corps and has personal experience both as a combat commander in Afghanistan and in Iraq, and is knowledgeable about the challenges that we face in the world.
And real quick, you have a problem giving him the waiver?
I understand some of my colleagues are raising a question about civilian control of the military. It's been more than 50 years since we've given such a waiver. I'll consider it. But I think it's important that President-elect Trump surround himself with a national security team with the kind of experience and character and success in the battlefield that General Mattis has demonstrated.
Senator Coons, thank you. Always good to talk with you, sir.
Great to be with you.